but it's on advice on how to adapt on the day. I think, Caroline, you might actually be best placed to address this from a marker's point of view.
I mean, from experience, when you get a pre-release, that's why I say you should always ask yourself when you're researching and doing all those things is what could go wrong. Because normally the info on the day would just change slightly on what you've pre-researched on and give you something differently. But the advice would be you won't get anything that is totally different from the work you've done previously. What you need to do is step back and ask yourself, like on the pre-release, I had 1, 2, 3. Now they're asking me to do 1, 2, 3. Okay, so maybe let me give you an example. So from previous year, you got a IFRS, was it IFRS 5? IFRS 5, where you were asked, they were telling you they were selling this division, blah, 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 but there weren't concrete information on that. I mean, when you pre-researching around if a division is sold or something is sold, what to do, the question would be to say, if it's sold prior to year end or it's sold after year end, what do I need to do? So those are the questions that you need to have when you pre-researching. And when you came in actually on that day, then they told you it was sold before year end. So then you know IFRS 5 is almost immediately applicable. So I mean, for me, I think just do that, because the triggers are more or less telling you what is going to be asked or not, right? So stick with that. Stick with things like, if it happens, or if it doesn't, then what should I do? But most of the time is what you've been pre-researching is what you're going to use to facilitate your answer. All you need to be doing is add those additional information that you're getting from that day. So never on that day, never start from scratch. You've got the foundation, use that to facilitate your answer. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Caroline. Again, emphasizing how important the pre-release period is, right? Like, I think if there's one thing that has come through is that those 5 days can make or break you. So please focus very much on them. Another question has come through. Dira, I'm going to send this one to you. A lot of judgment is required on depth and coverage on open-ended questions. Any advice on this? Dira, are you still there? Doesn't look like it. So Caroline, it's you again.
I'm not sure I agree with open-ended questions. I mean, I think if they open-ended, you wouldn't have a conclusion to make on those. So I don't think you would be asked an open-ended question. There's always a question. There's always an answer to what has been asked. But I guess you write about judgment, and judgment, it's more or less looking at your critical thinking again. Like, I mean, I think every year you get a question that you weren't expecting. And I think mostly those questions comes from financial management, on decision making on a project, on decision making on you've got a, I mean, let's take the AVO situation. I don't know if some of you wrote the AVO question, but on the AVO, there were like, you had an FEC situation there, your hedging decisions to do there. I think if you didn't go through and understand what could be triggered there, you could have went the other way. And a lot of judgment came in for you to decide on. It was literally what is happening globally, and from that perspective, how can you conclude on what you needed to do with that contract? So if you didn't have that, I think the assessment around you, the knowledge and understanding of what's happening globally, what needs to be done, what are the financial mechanism when you need to be hedging something, I think that question would have thrown you off. But at the end of the day, that question needed you to identify what the issue was, also the solution of hedging or not, and concluding if that was the right decision for the business or not. So you'll never get an open-ended question. I haven't seen it in my history of doing this APC. So my advice is there's normally a solution to what you've been asked. You have to look at what is being asked, and if you can be able to identify the issues appropriately and conclude on that.
Thank you, Caroline. Rindo, I see you've got your hand up. Do you want to elaborate on your question?
Yes, sorry. Caroline, I just want to expand. Maybe it was just too brief. My question was an open-ended toss or question. What I mean is it's a question that might be multidisciplinary, or where it's kind of they will ask you, okay, some of the time they will say, give us 8 factors, to consider. But this one, it's not giving me a number. It will just say, what are the key factors to consider? And then sometimes it will say, what are the key issues? Or maybe it will say, how should we go about this? They'll give me a whole story. How should we go about this? So then you will realize that it can be accounting, auditing, tax, and everything. So I'm just trying to understand what is the examiner's interest in those instances. How do I structure my response?
Caroline, before you respond, can you please be very brief? Time is no longer on our side.
Okay, sure. I'll be brief. But it normally brings down to what the tasks have asked you. Probably the issues are there on the task that you just need to go through and pick that up. And I mean, it also would depend on the length of the task and what you read in there to be able to answer that, because you're not guided on 8, 4, or 3, but what your guidance is on the information that you're given. I hope I've answered that.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Caroline. It has been an absolute pleasure having you, and I hope you have a wonderful day further. We will now be moving on to the next section, which speaks where we'll get experience from previous candidates. So we have Unatlano, who was on the honors roll of the March 2021 sitting, as well as Umkhomotsi, who's our chair of the education committee from Abasa Tswane, as well as a successful candidate in the 2021 sitting. So they will basically talk us through their experience of the APC, as well as advice going forward. I will ask Matlalo to go first, and I'll give you 10 minutes each. Thank you.
Thanks, Kanyisile. Hi, everyone. I think I'd first like to say to everyone who qualified to write the PsyCA exam that well done on coming this far. A lot of people have walked this journey but have not gotten to where you are, and I know the hard work that goes into the preparation throughout the year. So I really think you need to give yourself a pat on the back for getting this far. My journey with APC has not been an easy one. I wrote my first assessment in 2020 and I was unsuccessful. I just remember how devastated I was when I got my results, and for a very long time I was in denial. It probably took me a month to accept that I didn't make it, and at that point I had to decide whether I'm writing again or I am just gonna give up. And just knowing my personality, knowing myself, when I start something, I make sure I finish it. So I probably would have never forgiven myself had I not given up so easily and not went and wrote the second time. So for me, I think that's really what kept me going and what kept me determined. And after all of that, I sort of sat down with myself and reflected on 2020 and what I didn't do well. And in all of that, I realized that I didn't quite grasp the whole concept of APC and really what it takes to be competent. I realized that there was a lot of gap in my knowledge and my answers were still a bit ITC kind of question, where I was not applying myself, where I was doing a lot of theory dumping. So I decided that I needed a more detailed board course that will help me with those areas. When I reflected back on the feedback I would get, which I wish I had taken it and improved on it in 2020, but I did not do that. But I lacked a lot of depth in my answers, and business acumen was always one that came up a lot. Even when I did the 2021 a board course with Endunamo, those two were like the main things that I needed to improve on. And I just remember the first two assessments with Endunamo didn't go well for me. I got LCs for both of them. I just remember the second one in particular. I went into the exam already defeated. And this was mainly because my research was not up to scratch. And I was just doubting myself the whole time. So, which brings me to my first point of your mindset needs to be, you need to be positive going into the exam. The minute you go into the exam already defeated, already doubting yourself, you start panicking, which is what happened to me. I started panicking, and when you start panicking, you cannot think, you forget even the things that come easily to you. So I started, the first thing I changed was my mindset. I went into the exam with confidence that I am capable of passing this exam and I'm already competent. I just need to demonstrate and put it down for the marker to see that I am competent. And for the other thing I had to do was improve on my research. And part of that was changing my group, getting a new group. I know it's probably too late to do that now, but I changed my group, and I feel like that was one of the best decisions I've made. I made for myself at that point, because my new group was as disciplined as I was. They held me accountable, and I felt like they challenged my thinking, and I learned something new from each and every session I had with them. So I also improved on my research. In my previous groups, we would split the triggers and then we would come together. Each person would discuss the trigger they researched and would sort of compile a file, and that's the file you would go into the APC exam with. And I realized that I did better in the triggers that I researched myself compared to the ones where I just took my group's research and read through it and went with that into the exam. So what we did with my new group was each person researched each and every trigger that we identified. And I really saw an improvement in my results from that. I made sure that I research each and every trigger thoroughly and that I understand each and every trigger and that I don't put anything in my file which I don't understand. For instance, if I read a write-up by a firm, I would read it and summarize it, and the summary is what I would go with into the exam. For this really helps you to avoid flipping through hundreds of pages trying to find something that will help you to answer the question. So I definitely think getting your research proper, doing proper research, industry research for me was a big one, especially with the business acumen, understanding the industry that the company you're given operates in really helped me to apply myself instead of just dumping the theory in my responses. And then during the pre-release period, what I would do was I would wake up in the morning, print 4 copies of the pre-release, come back, read the pre-release, identify the triggers, meet with my group, and then would consolidate our triggers. And then after that, I would sit down and take 4 days of the pre-release and split those days into about 3 or 4 hours each. And then I'd populate each trigger identified into those sessions that I've made for myself. And I never spent anything more than 4 hours on a trigger. Some triggers are longer than others. So I think it includes a lot of judgment to determine how many hours you need to spend on a trigger. But having a timetable really helped me to be disciplined and to be focused and to know that I sit down and I do the research and I only have 4 hours to get this done and to do it thoroughly. And the reason why I printed 4 copies was that each and every morning I would wake up and take an hour and read through a clean paper with no highlights, with no notes. And this was just to see if I can identify anything that I might have missed the previous day when I was reading through the pre-release. And the other thing I would advise against is if you get a pack, don't read it. If someone sends it to you, delete it, don't open it. I learned this lesson early in 2020 because what happens is that you do your research and then you get the pack, and when you open it, there's so much that you probably did not identify when you are doing your research and you are identifying your triggers. So that sends you automatically into a panic, and then what you try rush reading through it and seeing what you can take and put into your research, but you don't really understand. I don't think you fully understand what's written in that pack. And what I noticed was that sometimes the information that is in these packs that make rounds is that they're sometimes not accurate. So if you have not done your research, you will end up taking inaccurate information and putting that into your file and bringing that into your responses at the end, at the actual assessment. And I think my last advice would be, and this is also something I learned the hard way, if you discuss a trigger with your group and 5 of your group members are of a different argument than what you had researched and concluded, and you're not fully convinced of their argument, I would say stick to your argument, because you more likely able to articulate yourself better because you've actually done the research instead of taking your group's research and you're not convinced of what they're saying. And so what happened to me in 2020, there was a question where we had to identify the performance obligations, and I probably spoke to 10 different people and asked of their opinion how many performance obligations do they think are there in the contract? And of all the people I spoke to, no one had the same answer as I did, but they all had similar, they all had identified the same number. And the question came up in the exam. It didn't change much. And I remember just going into a panic and thinking, well, there are 10 people who have the same answer. Surely they can't be wrong. And I ditched my own conclusion and I tried to write what they were saying, all the information I could remember they were telling me. And I did badly in that question. And I realized that had I stuck to my research and my conclusion, I would have done better in that question, because when I read the specimen's response, it went either way. It all depended on how you applied yourself and how you justified what you identified. So I would definitely say have confidence in yourself. You are capable of doing this. You've come this far. We've gone through CTA, you've gone through ITC, you've passed the board course. You are competent. You just need to go into that assessment with confidence, believing that you've already passed, and let that come through in your responses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nakolo. I am going to pass to Mogomoze now, but please stay on the line to answer questions after Mogomoze has spoken as well. Mogomoze, over to you.
Hi, Fanny. Thank you so much. I'm just trying to check if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
All right, thank you so much. Again, guys, I'm Mogomoze Komu, and I'm very pleased to be a part of this. Learned so much from all the other speakers, and I think we can all agree that for some of us, like myself, who was a repeater, a lot of what was said has brought back a lot of things that, I've experienced, mistakes that I've done, where I've went wrong, things that I think I knew that I did wrong as well. So I'm really honored to be a part of this and also just be able to impart on what I experienced. My first APC was 2019. So it took me until the third attempt, and, to Motolo's point as well, where you really learn the hard way. But I think also what you experience is the hardest thing to do is to do the post-mortem, after failing or after not being successful, when you realize that I actually have to reflect. And that's probably the hardest thing to do, but the best thing you can do, to open up all the wounds, to see where you went wrong and actually reflect and be honest with yourself on what you actually need to improve going forward. So I think that's the initial advice that I'd give, is that be able to reflect, like really, really go back and see, what did I do wrong? Why did I do it wrong? Did I actually understand what I was doing? Which will actually enable you and empower you to know how to do it right going forward, right? So just to touch on that, I think the mental preparation is the most important thing that I saw. I mean, to all the panelists, they also just mentioned that, the technical aspects.
I told him, it's a 14-day.
Sorry, Grace, please mute yourself. Thank you.
The mental preparation is the most important that I would like to focus on. And I mean, Aisha will also touch on that. But, I'd like to go back to even like saying how important it is to be aware of what are we working towards, what you're working towards, not taking it as simple as just another exam, even though it is, where you don't want to blow it out of proportion and make it so big out of your life where you feel like, this is a make or break where you become successful or not. And I say that because, when 2021, when we were preparing for the finals, or even before, I decided that I'm not going back to writing this because it was my third time. Speaking to even Dolo's point that, it was the most heartbreaking thing to fail. I failed twice. First time when I failed, I thought that, like the world has ended, or, you're not going to make it out of this, I think. And then life will challenge you, and I'm speaking to developing that emotional resilience, which is important because life is happening, daily things will happen. And that's going to come across in many different forms. And that's going to test you. And what I want to say is embrace however way you lost or suffered from whatever this journey is, but trust me, it's going to make the best person out of you, right? So I think that's important to also understand, to show up regardless of how you feel. You know, we unfortunately can't shake off all the anxiety or feeling stressed, but shake it off, do your best. I can safely say that I've had more inner conversations with myself before the exam, in the exam, where I really had to calm myself down if I'm thinking too much, too far ahead, where it's important for you to really come in a more relaxed state, be best presentable so that you feel comfortable, because it's going to be important on how you do on the day. And, you know, just to touch also on tips that I can give was, you know, with whether it's the pre-release or information on the day, you have to break down everything, you know, deciphering the pre-release and information on the day, everything that jumps up that comes to you, see it. But also it starts where pre-release, you had to be really assembled in how you breaking down your triggers. So, and for me, what I had to learn and improve on is not just to read it, but to also see, I had a few criteria, I mentioned like 4, where when you read it, understand what the issue is. Really decipher and see what is the issue, ask yourself that. And I think that's what Caroline mentioned, where what can go wrong, you know, the term that we use on the board course. Understand the issue, find that issue where you see what is this company trying to resolve. That's where you come in as the candidate or the next CA, whatever role you're in. Understand the audience that you're actually going to be deliberating this to, giving your response to. And another thing that Kai even spoke to was format. It's important to know what format you need to respond in. That's most important, so that you are formidable in however way you plan and gonna actually answer. So I had a blank paper where, after reading the pre-release, you know, deciphering all the triggers, understanding what is actually relevant in each and every document, you're able to see and plan out, okay, this is how my research is going to be. And one thing with research is that you can't delegate research. I think that's the most important thing, because research will also allow you to also see, for all the disciplines, what is relevant for you to know for each of the matter that you're trying to resolve, because you have to think broadly. You know, they always say this, and I think it's easy said than done, but it's important for you to ask yourself. If you always ask yourself, what is the issue, you will be able to then ask yourself a text question, a strategy question, an audit question, an accounting question if it's relevant, right? So be able to do that. So this blank sheet of paper that I had, I made sure that after reading and being a bit comfortable with the pre-release, every document that you read through, have a one-pager. Have a one-pager where you're saying, okay, this is the issue that I've come to. This is the audience that I'm looking at. This is the format that I would expect to be seeing out of it. Obviously, with the format, you will get much more clarity on the day. Be able to even say, what would be my intro to this body? How would I actually respond to this? And then your conclusion. That's going to allow you to see on the day what actually changed. How did this thing actually develop? Obviously, on the day, that's when you're going to get required points to actually direct you, okay, this is what I need out of the whole document that we gave you. And then you're able to then plan out your answer, right? So, and for me on the day, what I did, which I had to improve or try another strategy, was initially I would read all the tasks on the day to actually understand what is coming out. But I believe personally that maybe gave me a lot of anxiety, because then I would think about everything, you know, versus the third time when I was writing became successful. What I did was, every task that came through, I started with it without looking at everything else behind that. For me, that kind of helped me, but you know, you had to be disciplined with the time. You had to respect the time so that you know that you don't go over, whether it's an hour, whatever the case is. But obviously, it's also not easy to tell how much time you're going to allocate. So for me, that was my strategy that helped in ensuring that every task that I did, it allowed me to, you know, because I mean, we have 8 hours. You have to plan at some point. So for me, I had to make sure that every task that I went through, I planned it. And I had my pre-release blank sheet that I planned a summary of it. I had that day and I had a new blank sheet for on the day. Yes, it took time, maybe it took 5 minutes, but that 5 minutes allowed me to actually plan out how am I actually going to deal with task A that came through. It has 3 required, it's fine. Within the required, pre-release told me 1, 2, 3. Now it either developed and then there's 4 points that I need to add on. So you need to see all of that, but you're only going to see that when you're really calm. When you're really calm with yourself, where you understand that this beast, please eat it bit by bit. You know, I won't cap and say APC is not hard, you know, that it's easy. That's not the case. But it will be easy to someone who can really see everything flowing, everything coming through to them. So, and that's something that, you know, you either learned, practice that throughout the board course, which was the point, you know, where obviously you will brush up also on your technical, but the most important thing was for you to be comfortable also. And, you know, in our intro session to the Indonamo program, what I was saying is that mentally prepare yourself, but physically as well, because the 8 hours is coming, whether you like it or not. In 2021, December, it even got worse with laptops and all of that. And people obviously got sidetracked. And it's important for you to remain calm at that point, because anything can happen. Obviously, we're not hoping that, you know, we're hoping that things are better at this time and there's no such things that happen. And, you know, from my side, just to wrap it up, I really want to say that please respect your time. Plan every part of your response, whether it's intro, body, conclusion. Know what you're going to do, know what you're going to say. It's important for you to have a clear plan so that you're not finding yourself swaying because something comes up and, you know, throws you off on what you expected. There's no point in having like a thick file. As long as whatever's in your file is what you understand, I think that will be your golden key, you know. And for me, I feel like at some point, it's either your file is going to shoot you in the foot because you expect it to save you. It's your file. And because it's your file, it should be within you to know, okay, fine, this is what I did. And that's why I think the one-page summaries were the most important to allow me to really break it down, but condense everything so that it's not all over the show, because it can get very tense in there. But I trust that you guys will also do your best. To leave you with some words is that please demand more out of yourself. I believe that, you know, for me to have made it finally on my 3rd attempt is because, like I said, I decided that I'm not coming back. You know, I decided that I'm going to make it work. But that said, I had to sacrifice a lot. So sacrifice, because if it's for you, this investment, please pay the cost. Whether you're sleeping late, but don't burn out, obviously, you know, but put everything on the line. And for you, it means putting in the time, putting in the mental focus, and really being aware that this is for your future and where you know that you are here. And to everyone who's a repeater, that's here, that's back, that's still finding themselves standing out, I applaud you. You can do this. Still have the enthusiasm like you did the first attempt, the second attempt. Do it the right way. Have fun while doing it, which is the hardest, but please have fun while doing it, because you need to learn out of this. You need to learn out of this lesson or this experience and take it forward, you know. And like Ngotolo said, congratulations on passing board courses, but this is the end game. This is where now you have to come through, and please give it your best. Please give it your best. Leave everything there. Where you feel like you're getting fuzzy, calm yourself down, inner voice, bring it across, and really put yourself down and put it all on the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. I was about to call to give you a time warning. Thank you so much. Thank you to both yourself and Makolo. I'll go into some questions. Sorry, guys, I think you've all noted we're slightly behind schedule. So we'll try to make up that time either through the comfort break or through Aisha's session. So I'm trying to see what was the last question. I see, Pumlani, you're asking about dealing with emotions. Aisha, our next speaker, will talk us through this, and hopefully it will be of assistance to you, as Caroline has said. Then I see a request for advice on time management because the last question is always difficult to finish. Not all, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So is this time management on the day? I'm
Yes, on the
assuming.
day.
So I really think what worked for me was taking an hour at the beginning to read through the whole pre-release, the whole information on the day, and read that in conjunction with the pre-release. And also just read the tasks and identify which tasks I am more comfortable with. And those were the ones that I did first, just to help boost my confidence. And I also just tried to see which ones do I think are much shorter, because some are longer than others. And what then I would do would just take the remaining 7 hours and just spread them, divide them by the 7 tasks. And I think that came up to 55 minutes per task. And if the 55 minutes was over and I felt like I had not put down everything that I needed to, I simply moved on, because you probably would have written everything that you know in the first, in that 55 minutes, and anything after, you're just trying to see what can I add to make my answer, to get a more competent answer. And I feel like then you are sort of wasting time and you're taking away from the other tasks. So I think you really need to be strict with yourself. If you've allocated an hour or 30 minutes to a task, after that 30 minutes, move on. You probably, you would have written everything you know within that 30 minutes. And some tasks were shorter than others, so some wouldn't take the full 55 minutes, and that gave me time to add on to the other tasks, and just at the end to have maybe an extra 30 minutes or 20 minutes to read through each and every task and see if there was anything that I would think of that I had not already put down.
Great, thank you. Then there's a question just to confirm, when you said you had made 4 copies of the pre-release, was that used for the 4 days of the pre-release period?
Yes, so that was used for the 4 days of the PRI. Each day I would read a fresh paper, a clean copy of the PRI. Because I make notes as I read. I just write what came to my mind, what stunned, whatever I read triggered. So I read and I highlight. Just reading a fresh copy just helped me to see if there's nothing more I could identify, or if there's any new trigger that I could identify which I didn't identify the previous day.
Thanks. Well, I'll send this to you. The 2 questions on how many times did you meet with your group during the pre-release period? Or how many times did you advise meeting with the group?
We met twice with my group. So it was to discuss the triggers, and then it was to discuss the research that we had done. So I think we met on day 4, which was the second last day of the pre-release. And that's when we would discuss everything that we had researched. I would say, honestly, that worked for me, because I think sometimes you learn more from actually doing the work yourself than discussing the stuff with your group. You might learn a thing or two from discussing with your group, but I would say spend more time doing the actual research than meeting with your group. But that also depends on you. Are you a person who thrives in group work, or are you a person who prefers to work alone? But for me, just spending more time doing the actual research and having one meeting with my group at the end to discuss what we had researched was sufficient.
Thanks. Mohammed, what was your take on working with groups? Did you approach a similar attempt of meeting with your group, or did you do it more often?
With us, I think we tried to make it more interactive, where we always spoke so that, as much as we tried to share some of responsibilities, it was also like important for us to still look at everything by ourselves. So I think allocating maybe say 3 days where you guys will see each other, obviously final day where it should ideally be in the morning, where the rest of the day it's just you and the file, where you really combining it and getting comfortable with it, which I think from Thursday night really with the file. But we met more. So from first day we met to after having read the pre-release, kind of looked at your triggers that you are seeing. We felt that it was important to meet each other on the first day, whether it was maybe 3 hours after pre-release, to speak about it, to I guess highlight some key things that maybe you might have missed, you didn't see. And then from there we saw, okay, fine, this is how many that we see, this is how many that we can agree on, that okay, this is coming across. And then from there, you do your you do your research, break it down, understand the industry. Again, on Tuesday, let's say it's from Monday to Friday, where you're doing your 5 days. So the second day where we again met, but only in the afternoons, where we now saying, okay, this is where I've reached with my research. This is what I found. What are you guys seeing that I may have missed? I think it's important, or it was important for us to really be able to keep each other on the ball and accountable, so that people are seeing things and you're not seeing anything too late. I think that was the importance of it.
Great, thank you. I see we still have other questions in the chat, but we are really out of time. I'll ask Notlolo to please rather respond in the chat. For the moment, I'd like to speak. Yes.
Sorry, Kanyisile, to disturb. I can't see the chat on my side.
Oh, okay.
That
is fun. So don't worry. Let me send you the question, and then we can post your responses then in the chat from our side.
Okay, cool.
So now I'd just like to thank both Notlolo and Mkhomoze for sharing their experiences, sharing their advice, and I hope you guys are able to take something from this and incorporate it to make it your own, right? Because at the end of the day, different things work with different people. We take advice and then we own it and see how we can best make it work for us. We'll now go on to a short comfort break. If we can all please be back and ready to continue at 11:15. Our next session will be Matchday Mindset, where we'll talk about some of the issues on getting your mind right, how to cope with funny things that might happen during the day, how to stay in balance, and just cover basically keeping yourself focused on the day of the actual exam. So see you guys just now.